Dying lioness brings cubs to a grizzly bear. What followed was absolutely unthinkable. A massive grizzly bear, weighing over 800 pounds, stands face to face with a dying lioness. Between them, two tiny lion cubs mew desperately, their golden fur matted with dirt and fear. This isn't the African savanna or the forests of North America. This is Riverside Wildlife Sanctuary in Montana, where the impossible is about to happen. The lioness, barely able to stand, takes one final step forward. Her amber eyes, once fierce and proud, now dim with approaching death, lock onto the bear's dark gaze. What happens next defied everything we thought we knew about the animal kingdom. The bear could crush those cubs with a single swipe of his massive paw. Instead, something unthinkable occurred. Something that would change the lives of everyone who witnessed it and challenge our understanding of compassion in the wild. But to understand how we got to this extraordinary moment, we need to go back to where it all began. 6 months earlier, deep in the Montana wilderness, a golden lioness named Amber lived in the most unlikely of places. She wasn't supposed to be there. Lions don't belong in North American forests. But Amber was a rescue, saved from an illegal exotic animal operation that had been shut down by federal agents. Amber had been pregnant when she arrived at Riverside Wildlife Sanctuary, run by a compassionate woman named Sarah Mitchell. Sarah had spent her entire life working with animals, but she'd never encountered a situation quite like this. How do you care for an African lioness in the mountains of Montana? The moment I saw Amber, I knew she was special, Sarah would later recall, her voice thick with emotion. She had this dignity about her, even after everything she'd been through. Amber gave birth to 3 cubs that spring, 2 males and 1 female. Sarah named them Hunter, Dakota, and Little Belle. For a few precious months, it seemed like Amber might have found her second chance at happiness. She was a devoted mother, teaching her cubs to hunt small prey in the sanctuary's enclosed habitat, grooming them with the tenderness that only a mother's love can provide. But fate had other plans. The first sign something was wrong when Amber started losing weight rapidly. Dr. James Crawford, the sanctuary's veterinarian, ran every test he could think of. The diagnosis was devastating. Amber had developed a rare form of cancer that was spreading aggressively through her body. I've delivered a lot of bad news in my 30 years as a vet, but telling Sarah that Amber had maybe weeks to live, that was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. The tragedy deepened when just 2 weeks later, Little Belle didn't wake up one morning. The stress and Amber's declining condition had affected her milk, and the smallest cub simply couldn't survive. Hunter and Dakota, the 2 remaining cubs, clung to their dying mother with desperate urgency. Sarah faced an impossible decision. What do you do with orphaned lion cubs when their mother is dying? In the wild, they would never survive. In captivity, hand-raising them would be incredibly challenging, expensive, and dangerous. But the story takes an even more unexpected turn when we meet the sanctuary's most unlikely resident. In the north section of Riverside Wildlife Sanctuary lived a massive grizzly bear named Brutus. Now, Brutus wasn't your typical bear. He had been rescued as a cub after his mother was killed by poachers in Yellowstone National Park. A park ranger named Tom Bradley had found the tiny, starving cub and brought him to Sarah's sanctuary when no other facility could take him. That was 8 years ago. Brutus had grown into a magnificent 850-pound male with chocolate brown fur that gleamed in the Montana sunlight. But despite his fearsome appearance and powerful build, those who knew him best understood that Brutus had a gentle soul. Brutus was always different, Sarah explained. Most bears, even in captivity, maintain their wild instincts and can be unpredictable. But Brutus seemed to understand that he was safe here, that this was his home. He had this almost human quality to his expressions. What made Brutus truly special was something Sarah had observed over the years: his apparent empathy for other animals in distress. When an injured deer had somehow made it into the sanctuary's perimeter, Brutus would sit quietly nearby, almost as if he were keeping watch. When an owl with a broken wing was being treated in an outdoor enclosure, Brutus would position himself where he could see the bird, remaining perfectly still for hours. It was like he appointed himself the sanctuary's guardian, Tom Bradley observed during one of his visits. I've never seen anything like it in 40 years of working with wildlife. But what was about to happen would challenge everything they thought they knew about Brutus and about the capacity for cross-species compassion. As Amber's condition deteriorated, she began displaying behavior that left everyone at the sanctuary puzzled and heartbroken. Instead of staying close to the heated shelter Sarah had prepared for her and the cubs, Amber kept moving towards the north section of the sanctuary, towards Brutus's enclosure. Dr. Crawford first noticed Amber's strange behavior on a cold Tuesday morning in November. Despite her weakening condition, the lioness was attempting to carry Hunter in her mouth like mother cats carry kittens, while Dakota followed closely behind. At first, I thought she was just confused, Dr. Crawford recalled. Animals in pain sometimes exhibit unusual behaviors. But then I realized she was moving with purpose. She knew exactly where she was going. Sarah and her team watched in amazement as Amber, using what little strength she had left, made the arduous journey across the sanctuary grounds. She would carry one cub for a short distance, then go back for the other, rest, then continue the journey. It took her 3 hours to travel what should have been a 10-minute walk. But Amber was determined. I'll never forget the moment she reached the fence line of Brutus's enclosure. She gently set Hunter down next to his brother, then looked across the fence at Brutus, who had been watching this entire procession from about 30 feet away. What happened next defied everything we thought we knew about animal behavior. Brutus slowly approached the fence, not with the curiosity of a predator seeing potential prey, but with something that looked remarkably like concern. His massive head lowered as he examined the lioness and her cubs through the chain-link barrier. Amber, barely able to stand, made a sound that Dr. Crawford had never heard before. Not quite a roar, not quite a whimper. It was almost like she was communicating, asking for something. In that moment, I swear it seemed like she was introducing her babies to Brutus. Like she was saying, "These are my cubs. Please, help them." The grizzly bear sat down heavily, his intelligent dark eyes fixed on the small family before him. For nearly an hour, they remained like this: the dying lioness, her 2 precious cubs, and the massive bear, separated only by a fence, but connected by something far more profound. But Amber wasn't finished with her impossible request.
That evening, as the Montana sky painted itself in shades of purple and gold, Sarah made a decision that went against every protocol, every safety measure, and every rational thought in her head. She was going to remove the fence between Amber and Brutus. "Everyone thought I'd lost my mind," Sarah admitted. "My insurance company would have canceled my policy in a heartbeat if they'd known. But something in Amber's eyes told me this was what she needed, what she was asking for." Dr. Crawford and Tom Bradley stood by with tranquilizer guns, just in case. Sarah's hands shook as she unlocked the gate section that separated the two enclosures. She swung it open and stepped back, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. For a moment, nothing happened. Brutus remained seated, watching. Amber lay beside her cubs, her breathing labored and shallow. Then, with movements so careful they seemed almost reverent, Brutus rose to his feet and slowly approached the lioness and her cubs. Hunter and Dakota, who should have been terrified of this massive predator, didn't run. They stayed close to their mother, their golden eyes wide but unafraid. Brutus stopped just 3 feet away from Amber. He lowered his enormous head and gently sniffed the air around the lion family. Amber, summoning strength from somewhere deep within her failing body, raised her head to meet his gaze. What followed was the most extraordinary display of interspecies communication any of them had ever witnessed. Brutus laid down, making himself as small and non-threatening as possible. He stretched out his massive paw and, with incredible gentleness, touched Amber's face with the tip of one claw. Not to harm, but to comfort. The lioness, this magnificent creature who had traveled thousands of miles from her African homeland only to face death in a Montana sanctuary, pressed her head against the bear's paw and closed her eyes. She had found what she was looking for. Amber passed away peacefully that night, with Brutus maintaining his gentle vigil beside her. But the story doesn't end there. It was just the beginning of something miraculous. As dawn broke over the Montana mountains, Sarah and Dr. Crawford expected to find 2 orphaned cubs cowering in terror from the massive bear. Instead, they discovered Hunter and Dakota curled up against Brutus's warm fur, sleeping soundly. The grizzly bear had become their guardian. Over the following weeks, something unprecedented unfolded at Riverside Wildlife Sanctuary. Brutus, this powerful predator who could have ended the cubs' lives in an instant, instead became their protector, their playmate, and in every way that mattered, their adoptive father. He would gently bat at them with his massive paws during play, always careful never to use his full strength. When they were hungry, he would share his food, pushing chunks of fruit and vegetables toward them with his nose. When they were cold, he would curl his body around them, providing warmth and security. "I've been studying animal behavior for 20 years, Dr. Crawford marveled, and I've never seen anything like this. Brutus somehow understood that these cubs needed him, and he stepped into that role without hesitation. The cubs thrived under Brutus's care. Hunter grew bold and adventurous, often climbing on his adoptive father's back like a living mountain. Dakota was more gentle and affectionate, preferring to curl up against the bear's side for afternoon naps. Local news stations picked up the story, then national outlets. Soon, people from around the world were following the daily adventures of the grizzly bear dad and his lion cubs. But more than just entertainment, their story became something else entirely, a beacon of hope in a world that often seems divided by differences. Today, nearly a year later, Hunter and Dakota are healthy, happy young lions. They still live with Brutus, though as they've grown larger, they've begun to establish their own spaces within the shared enclosure. The bond between them remains unbreakable. Brutus, now 9 years old, has become something of a celebrity, but more importantly, he's become a symbol of something we all desperately need to see more of in our world: the power of love to transcend every boundary. Amber's final gift wasn't just ensuring her cubs would survive. She showed us that love recognizes no species, no differences, no barriers. She trusted in the basic goodness that exists in all living creatures. The Riverside Wildlife Sanctuary has used the attention from this incredible story to expand their rescue operations. They've saved dozens of animals from abuse and neglect, giving them second chances at life, love, and happiness. Amber's legacy lives on, not just in her surviving cubs, but in every animal that finds sanctuary, every person who chooses compassion over indifference, every moment when we choose to see past our differences to the common bonds that unite us all. If this story moved you, there are ways you can help. Wildlife sanctuaries across the country need your support to continue their vital work. A simple donation, sharing stories like this one, or volunteering at local animal shelters can make a real difference. Because in a world that sometimes seems ruled by division and conflict, stories like Amber, Brutus, Hunter, and Dakota remind us of a profound truth. Love is the most powerful force in the universe, capable of creating families in the most unexpected places and hope in the darkest moments. And if a dying lioness and a grizzly bear can find common ground, imagine what we humans might accomplish if we choose to lead with love.